Howdy! Post recording Segrix here. I just wanted to record this little segment because I expanded on my thoughts a little more while I was writing the description down below, so I figured I might as well just read it out since I feel like I go more in depth here. But to reiterate, I genuinely agree with the frustrations on display throughout Coppersan's video, but I didn't completely agree with the direction his video took. MapleStory is very much a love the game, hate the developer type of experience. It pretty much always has been. And while it's seemingly non-stop, the slew of issues at the moment, I don't agree that the game isn't worth playing. From a purely gameplay look at MapleStory in 2023, the game has never been better. Reboot is showing just how good this game can be. Leveling is faster than it has ever been. Resources are easier to obtain than they have ever been, and classes generally are seeing the positive changes that they've needed for years, in some places even decades. There's a ton that is wrong with the game, don't get it twisted. GMS is a mess, caught in a constant state of release non-KMS content that will make money and remove non-KMS content that doesn't make money, messes with balance, breaks the progression curve Korea had in mind, a million and one other excuses that Nexon can and likely will come up with. However, I don't see this changing anytime soon. GMS has not had a dev team here in America to support this region's version of the game for a couple of years now, meaning that the sole responsibility for coding everything to work on GMS is left up to the understaffed and underfunded overseas team in Korea. So these things that have been major problems in the region for years, it shouldn't be there, as Coppersan said in the video, is a really bad argument to make when the team that is working on the game is not the same team that added this content originally. They likely are also unaware of how little or how great the impact of specific things are for different regions. They're not the ones that implemented a lot of this content. They really wouldn't know unless they've played this region for so long like we have as players, how impactful these things are. Which explains why it might take a long time for them to seemingly come to the realization that, holy cow, this is pretty broken. Why hasn't this been removed? Why has Kana had a monopoly on the only source of spawn boosters outside of this giga expensive pay-to-win totem for going on 10 years? GMS is in a catch-22 of being an overseas server created by a developer team that had different ideals and plans for the game as a service than the team that is currently tasked with maintaining and supporting it in the long run. Nexon Korea is giga xenophobic with unofficial MapleStory content, so the old just add X to KMS argument, just add Kana spawn boosters, just increase the spawn, it'll never work. This stuff made outside of Nexon Korea is not even considered MapleStory in their eyes. They look at it as something completely devoid of value because they are not the region that created it. As far as addressing his second point with the Meso shop changes, I wanted to touch on it as well. Coppersan kind of, intentionally or not, glosses over the main reason why the shop got increased. Bosses up to normal Lotus and Damien give more Meso in GMS than in Korea, and that's the meta. And these bosses are significantly easier to get mules up to thanks to non-KMS content. Galix, especially, non-KMS Links and Legion, and non-KMS events, Clover Guild being the most recent and one of the most powerful we've ever had, and the list goes on. So while it might not be exactly twice as many Mesos that we're making over Korea, taking all these things into consideration, it takes less time to get to the point where you're making more Mesos in GMS Reboot than in KMS Reboot by farming normal Lomian and down for your bossing mules, which is the meta. That's what everyone does. So a price change is semi-justifiable. I don't agree with it. I think it's gatekeeping bullshit, but I understand it. As far as the Reboot server shop changes, He's just wrong. Frenzy does over double our rates in some instances. For the best mobbers in the game on base spawn, you're looking at 17, 18k mobs per hour, maybe. The best mobbers in the game on frenzied spawn are pushing close to 50,000 mobs per hour. That's not just double, that's over double. So it's very justifiable for GMS Reg servers prices to also be affected. Not to mention, GMS Reg also has a massive Meso farmer problem right now with the Spanish Mafia, which is dragging our Meso value down lower and lower with every passing month. So look at this like you're a Korean developer who's only ever played MapleStory in Korea. Looking from the outside in on the GMS experience and trying to balance it, it looks like we're a fucking fiesta over here. And by all means, we pretty much are. But it's like, GMS will almost assuredly be in this double standard situation for the foreseeable future. That's a shit situation to be caught in, but it's the one we're stuck with. It's a very justified reason to be upset, and I don't disagree with how Coppersan feels on this. I just don't disagree. I just don't agree with the topics and how he positioned them and tried to portray it. This is definitely a stain on Nexon's reputation, but fucking most of Nexon's existence is a stain on Nexon's reputation. They don't need any help in that respect. But that's just my 2 cents here. What I think about the new Coppersan video? On like the one hand, I share the frustration that he feels, but it's very easy to play the devil's advocate for this situation because all of the things that have been removed were added to the game back when GMS had a local dev team. GMS no longer has a local dev team. So it's not a case of like non-KMS content keeps getting removed, but we keep having non-KMS events. It's more that non-KMS content that was added by the previous generation of devs for GMS that no longer exists is getting removed because there's no local team to support it anymore. And it's a lot more work for the overseas team to support this content. Whereas the new non-KMS stuff that we get is coming from regions that still have dev teams. And the reason they keep bringing non-KMS events over is because they make money. So it's like, while I share the frustration, I don't know. It's very explainable why these things are getting removed. I also think it's pretty disingenuous that he's saying, oh, just hire 2 more devs to support this stuff when nobody knows how hard it is to maintain Nexon's 20-year spaghetti code. Especially code from developers who haven't been with the game for years and years and years. Like, that would literally be tech torture. I couldn't imagine those poor devs. Oh, we're maxed. There we go. 5 minutes, easy clap. So, like, I agree. I don't think removing Jett is the right play, but I can definitely see why they're removing Jett and why they are removing other non-KMS content. It's not so much non-KMS content as a whole, it's non-KMS content that was implemented by a dev team that no longer works on the game. They're removing extra problem points for the overseas team. It's also just horrible timing because KMS is going through an absolute big ol' shitstorm too. They've got bigger fires to quell on their own lawns right now than to deal with this random GMS stuff. Which definitely isn't an excuse because they publish overseas and everything, but it makes sense why this is all happening right now. It's like Nexon has accidentally gotten themselves to the point where their like free-to-play server is better than their live service server. And they somehow have to dig themselves out of this hole. So the whole "it never should have been added" argument is not as valid because there's no way to see this coming? Yeah, I mean, all of this content that has recently been removed, like every example he brought up in his video, aside from Monad, Monad is the only one you can really wag a finger at Nexon for. Aside from Monad, everything that's been removed was added to the game when GMS still had a local developer team here in America. We don't. Not anymore. Korea has taken over all coding for us. Our team here in North America is purely just a localization team. They translate everything from Korean to English, and then they run tests to make sure all of the code works. It's like they don't do any of the coding. They just translate everything over. Oh, I forgot to summon my familiars. Oh, wait a minute, these are the wrong familiars. Where's my Spoder at? Get out here, Spoder bro. How much of a project would it have been to rip out all of the old Jett code and just write new stuff in a format that the devs could support? I mean, at that point, it's kind of just sunk costs, right? It's like Jett was added by the old GMS dev team. It was never supposed to technically exist. Like, Jett was added to the game way back when Nexon had a far, far different policy for overseas content. Like, the Nexon of 11 years ago when Jett was added was way more open to their, like, local regions making their own content. Like, every region had its own content at one point in time. So every region had their own version of MapleStory. But, like, as time went on, Nexon moved more and more towards their version of MapleStory in Korea is the only proper version of MapleStory. So everything that was made by other developers in other regions isn't the proper MapleStory patch. So they wouldn't spend the time to take a class from one of those regions, especially one that no longer has a dev team to support that class, and just make it anew. They wouldn't do that because Jett doesn't exist in their proper MapleStory. The KMS shitstorm has been brewing for a while, yeah. The last domino to fall was the final damage change for Reboot. That was pretty much the turning point where Reg got overtaken. It's just taken a while for people to actually get exposed to how much better the experience is. It's like they definitely could have taken out Jett's old code and just remade the class, but that's a huge undertaking. Like it's a full twice a year patch that we get revamps for a set of classes. Like the Cygnus is only revamped 6 classes, and that was a 6-month endeavor from Nexon. So it's like it would be a lot of manpower, a lot of man hours just to remake Jett from the bottom up. And for a class that doesn't exist in their version of MapleStory, I just can't ever see them doing that. You can't just copy code and expect it to work. Yeah, especially code that's that old. Like, the writing has been on the walls since Zen got removed, that Jett was not being supported. There was hope for a while that it would survive in GMS because it's our class. It's literally the American class, the only one GMS made, but yeah. Since we don't have a developer team here in the States, it makes sense that it didn't. It sucks that it didn't. They're definitely not handling its deletion terribly well by giving people so many options that'll lead to inevitably more problems. But it's kind of the expected outcome. KMS just adopt Jett, please? For real. If only, if only. At least that's how I see it. I mean, I have a different view on it because I've literally been playing the game since the open beta, but I kind of expected Coppersan to have the same look because he's been around just as long. Maybe he just didn't connect the dots between those two things. But yeah, it's a very shitty situation. So I share the frustrations. It's just kind of inevitable. He's view farming? I don't think so. Like it's definitely a situation that needs to be addressed, and it's a very big negative situation, especially on top of everything else. He also has very valid points. They still haven't buffed Kana. They just yoinked 60% of Kana's damage and just never got back to that. So it's like overseas content has been overlooked quite heavily. Even the overseas contents that's still getting regular support. So it's like if the JMS dev team ever collapses like JMS does and Korea takes over developing for their region, I would not be surprised if Kana and Hayato go the same way as Jett. It's like once there's no local teams in that area where the classes originated from to support said classes and to fix their bugs, and it falls solely on the overseas team for Korea, which is already overstressed and understaffed, let's be real, it's kind of expected that they'll just cut costs by removing the most buggy content. A la Moonad. Moonad is really the only thing that you can point a finger at Nexon and be like, hey, you, bad. Because that was Korean made. Like, that was specifically made by Nexon Korea for the overseas regions, and they still didn't support it. So, I don't know. I think that's the biggest tell on how they see the overseas content. If it wasn't made specifically for the Korean players and the Korean live servers, its days are numbered. As soon as it's no longer supported by the region it came from, it's pretty much on death row.